Assalamualaikum. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rosida Enwanin. I am the reporter number 1. In this video, I'm going to discuss the lesson 7, which is the reading models. Now, let's start. Lesson 7, Reading Models. Overview: this lesson delves into the different reading strategies, top-down, bottom-up, and interactive strategies and emerging reading models. Learning outcomes: at the end of the lesson, the students can identify the reading models, differentiate the bottom-up, top-down, and interactive strategies, and outline different emerging reading models. Now let's proceed to lesson proper. Lead up. Readers employ reading strategies they find effective for them. They develop a set of reading strategies and match appropriate to each reading situation. They also have to adjust their reading behavior to deal with different situations, text type, and reading purposes. This means that every readers have different strategies they use in reading. Some of us use to visualize, predict, reviewing, and some of us prefer to read out loud or read silently. It depends to us what strategies we use that we find effective for us while reading. Reading models. Reading model is a reasonable framework that provides a general understanding of the reading comprehension process. So reading models are ways educators instruct and teach reading. And to be able to teach reading effectively, it is important to understand what happens when we read. As a future teacher, we need to know how students will learn how to read. So, researchers have shown that readers process text in different modalities. These are the models. First is bottom-up reading model, second is top-down reading model, and third is interactive reading model. So now, let's start with the bottom-up model. Bottom-up reading model is a reading model that emphasizes the reading or printed text. It says that reading is driven by a process, or in other words, reading is driven by a text, and it proceeds from part to whole. So when we say bottom-up reading model, it focuses on direct instruction of phonics, such as, for example, is identifying features of letters like curves and straight lines. So it focuses on the sound and pronunciation. Students become familiar with spelling patterns and learn to read sentences, paragraphs, and longer sentences. So bottom-up start from parts to whole, whereas students first understand the sound of letters, the words, and the longer sentences and the paragraphs. Students first learn the basic in order to fully understand more complex components. So it begins first in knowing the letter before understanding the whole text. So the main idea of bottom-up reading model is that it begins first in knowing the letter or the words before understanding the whole text. So for example is that you're asking the learners to read aloud. When you ask your students to read aloud in front of their classmates, they cannot focus on the meaning of what they read, but rather they focus on how they pronounce the letters or the words. In bottom-up model, readers needs to identify letter features, and combine letters to recognize spelling patterns. So they are the main
Proponents.
of bottom-up reading model. Now let's proceed to top-down reading model. Top-down reading model, it suggests that processing of a text begins the mind of the readers with meaning-driven process or an assumption about the meaning of the text. It also emphasizes readers bringing meaning to text based on their experiential background and interpreting text based on their prior knowledge or whole knowledge, high-order mental concepts such as the knowledge and expectations of the reader. So, top-down reading model, it is the opposite of bottom-up reading model. Top-down model is focused on the meaning rather than the sound, and it allows the learners to use their prior knowledge to understand and relate their experiences to the text that help them decode the meaning of that certain text. Top-down models ask readers to construct meaning from text, and this knowledge is made from whole text to the part words. It allows children to read real books and make sense of them, and also it utilizes making sense of grammar and text clues to figure out the unknown words. The main idea of top-down reading model is that it is not focused on understanding the meaning of each words but rather understanding the whole text. In short, it starts with the comprehension before going down to meaning of each words. The other feature of top-down model is reading for meaning is the primary objective of reading rather than the mastery of letters or sound and words. Example is teacher asks the learners to predict what is about to happen in a story, and through predicting, they will use their prior knowledge or experiences. And also, you may ask learners to relate their experiences to text that they are reading. Another example of top down model is that the whole language approach, wherein the learners are taught to identify entire words rather than combination of sounds. So they are the main of
Proponents.
top-down reading models. Now let's proceed to interactive reading model. Interactive reading model is a reading model that recognizes the interaction of bottom-up and top-down processes simultaneously throughout the reading process. In this model, good readers are both good decoders and good interpreters of text. So interactive reading model is a combination of the bottom-up and the top-down reading models. Teachers relies on both phonics instruction and prior knowledge to understand the meaning of the whole text. So teachers using interactive model use both instruction relying on the phonics and students' experiences with text, believing that each is necessary for understanding. In classrooms, using the interactive model, students receive direct instruction on the sound or symbol relationships in phonics and also instruction in comprehension. The reader and text interacts as the reader uses prior background knowledge from the text to derive meaning. For example, is that when you are letting your students to read a simple stories, you can ask them some questions so they become active and interaction may occur in the reading process. With this example, not
Proponents.
only the students' communication skill will develop but also their higher order thinking skills. So they are the main
Proponents.
of interactive reading model. To understand more, we have here a picture that shows the difference of the three models. First picture is the bottom up. So as we notice, the bottom up start with letters or sounds, then word recognition, then sentences or phrases, and finally to the comprehension. On the other hand, the top down start with comprehension and then to the sentences or phrases and then word recognition and to the letters and sounds. So in the bottom up, it is a working from parts to whole. It starts with the letters and words recognition, then understand words, and then understand the sentences, and finally understanding the whole. So in the top down, it is the opposite of bottom up. So the interactive is the combination of these two models. So now let's proceed to emerging reading models. First is Rumelhart model states that successful reading is both a perceptual and cognitive process. So it means that reading is the process of understanding written language. It begins with a flutter of patterns on the retina, and when successful, it ends with a definite idea about the author's intended message. Thus, reading is at once a perceptual and cognitive. So, it stresses the influence of various sources, namely feature extraction, orthographic knowledge, lexical knowledge, syntactic knowledge, and semantic knowledge. So, when we say feature extraction, it aims to reduce the number of features in a dataset by creating new features. So, as you can see here in the picture, the example of feature extraction is to summarize a certain text. Next is orthographic knowledge. Orthographic knowledge refers to the information that is stored in memory that tells us how to represent spoken language in a written form. So, it is a deals with letters and spelling. So, as you can see here in the picture, it is the conventional spelling system of our language or how we write our language. So it is about the correct writing of a certain text. For example, the correct spelling, the correct punctuation, or the capitalization of the letters. So next is the lexical knowledge. Lexical knowledge can be expressed in words. It encompasses all the information that is known about words and the relationships among understanding of words and their uses. So as you can see here in the picture, it is about understanding the words and their uses. Next is syntactic knowledge. So in syntactic knowledge, knowledge of how words can be combined in meaningful sentences or phrases. So, so for example is word order correction tasks. So as you can see here in the picture, words of sentences are presented in a jumbled order. So if the students have a syntactic knowledge, they can able to arrange these jumbled words. Lastly is the semantic knowledge. So aspect of language knowledge that involves word meaning or vocabulary found from the actual text, symbols, and signs themselves. So we can see here in the picture, the example is clothes. So that clothes have a different meaning. So
We know the meaning
like
of
for
a
example,
certain word.
t-shirt, shorts, jeans, sweater, and shirt. So that is what we can call semantic knowledge. So next is Stanovic model. He introduced the interactive compensatory reading model. Readers relies on both bottom-up and top-down processes simultaneously and alternatively depending on the reading purpose, motivation schema, and knowledge of the subject. So it explains the role of top-down and bottom-up processing. The model posits that comprehension includes processes operating of many levels. For example, is that letter recognition, word recognition, or phrases recognition, and so on. It also explains developmental and individual differences in the use of context to facilitate word recognition during reading. So next is Anderson and Pearson's schematic view. Comprehension, interaction between old and new information. Schema theory is already known general ideas, subsume, and anchor new information. Schemata, knowledge already stored in memory, function in the process of interpreting new information and allowing it into and become part of the knowledge. Schema, an abstract knowledge structure, a structure that represents the relationship among its component parts. So the difference between the schemata and the schema is that schemata is a plural term of schema. So the example here is the schema is the information we already have stored in our brain. This means that all information we have in our mind is what we can call schema. So as we read, with the help of schema and the interaction between the old and new information, we can easily comprehend what we are reading. So next is the Pearson and Tierney or RW model. States that reader reads with the expectation that the writer has provided sufficient clues about the meaning. This means that it involves a negotiating of meaning between the reader and the author, both of whom create meaning through the medium of the text. Pearson and Tierney model focuses on the thoughtful reader with four interactive roles. First is the planner, second composer, third editor, and the fourth is monitor. Planner creates goal, use existing knowledge, decides how to align with the text. So as a planner, the reader creates goals, mobilizes existing knowledge, and decides how to align himself or herself with the text. The reader must decide to what extent he or she will agree with the text. Composer searches for coherence in gaps with inferences about the relationship within the text. So, as a composer, the reader searches for coherence, often needing to fill in gaps with inferences about the relationship with the text. Editor examines his interpretation. In the role of editor, the reader stands back and examines his or her developing interpretation. The reader questions the text. Monitor directs the three roles. Simultaneously, with the above three roles, the reader acts as an executive of monitor. This monitor directs the three mentioned roles, deciding which particular role should dominate at any particular moment in the reading process. So next is Matthew Sand's model of attitude influence. States that attitude has componential construct, cognitive component or evaluation, affective component or feeling, and conative component action readiness. So it addresses the role of attitude and motivation in reading. Attitude has a tri-componential construct. All of these influence the intention to read. So the model provides feedback on how motivation may change and how important it is to address affective issues in teaching reading. So attitudes has really a big impact or influence on reading. Attitude toward reading have been clearly shown to influence the development of reading skills. Bottom-up models, so now let's summarize all the
Top-down
reading
reading
models,
models.
experience-based, interactive reading models, combination of bottom-up and top-down models, Rumelhart model, influence of various sources, Stanovic model, interactive compensatory, Anderson and Pearson schema, theoretic view, schema theory, Pearson and Tierney RW model, a reader with four interactive roles, Matthew Sands model of attitude and influence. Matthew Sands model of attitude, influence, attitude, and motivation. So that's all. Thank you so much for listening.